So we are broadcasting now. We'll let people file into the webinar. Welcome everyone to Powerhouse Arena's virtual events. My name is Chris, I'm the events coordinator. And tonight we are hosting the launch of The Final Eighth by Bridgit Dengel Gaspard. She'll be in conversation with Tamar Stone. You can buy copies of the book with signed book plates at powerhousebookstores.com. The link is in the event page and I'll post it here. If you have any questions, you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and Bridgit will take your questions at the end of the event, and I'll introduce our speakers now. Tamar Stone, MA, is an internationally recognized psychotherapist, consultant, consciousness teacher, senior voice dialogue facilitator, and the originator of the body dialogue process. She is the creator of Selves in a Box, a psycho-spiritual card deck and guidebook inspiring the interactive exploration of the selves. Bridgit Dengel Gaspard, LCSW, is the author of The Final Eighth and the founder of the New York Voice Dialogue Institute. She is a former performer who earned a master's degree from Columbia University and teaches at numerous professional settings, including Omega Institute. She lives in New York City, where she maintains a thriving private practice. And I'll let you guys take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, Tamar. Thanks,
Hi,
everybody, for being here. It's wonderful to have you. Thanks, New World Library, for publishing The Final Eighth and List Your Inner Selves to accomplish your goals, and Powerhouse Arena for hosting this wonderful party. And I thought I'd let everyone know that we're happy to answer questions. We encourage them, but we're going to save time at the end. So if you have them, you can start to put them in the chat box or the question and answer box. But a thing you might want to think of as we go through today is, what's a goal you're stuck on? And so as tonight unfolds, you might sort of think about your own goal. And that could be a way to transition a little bit, even during this hour. And so what is the final eighth? Jumping right in. So the final eighth is failing in sight of victory. It's when hardworking, creative, talented people get 7/8 of the way there and find themselves mysteriously stalled, unable to accomplish their cherished goal right in front of the finish line, whether it's career, health, finances, love, creativity. It's a success issue, and it's very painful, and examples abound of that last little undone bit. The final 5 pounds you don't lose. That great business idea you have with all the pieces in place, but you don't write that business plan and get the funding. Being ready for your life partner, dating productively, and always cutting it off just as it gets intimate. Or that final paper you never finish so you actually get the degree that you worked so long and hard for. And it's very painful. And so the final eighth is actually an issue I've struggled with over and over. And so this book really is a culmination of my life's work and includes many things. And because I struggled getting so hard, working so hard and getting close and seeing the finish line in sight, but not crossing it. And so stepping back a little bit, many moons ago, I was a professional performer in New York City a long time ago. And I was doing comedy and stand-up and writing a 2-woman show and really in the mix, auditioning. And I was looking around for creativity tools because I always was. And then I read about voice dialogue, and it electrified me just reading a description of this work. And voice dialogue is this revolutionary technique where you talk with different parts of yourself, also called alter egos, subpersonalities, inner selves, and you don't try to change their mind. If you talk to the inner critic or the perfectionist, you learn what they have to say, what's their point of view. And so I hunted down the doctors Hal and Sidra Stone and said, I want to learn more. How do I learn more? And then I started to get training. I started to facilitate people. Obviously, I got facilitated a lot in voice dialogue, got to know my inner selves. And the more I was involved with the work, the more blown away I was with the healing power, the transformation that happens around voice dialogue just was breathtaking. So that's when I turned my career over, got my degree from Columbia University, and became a practicing psychotherapist using voice dialogue. And so it's through voice dialogue I met my wonderful friend and colleague, Tamar Stone. Hello, hello. Thanks for being with me.
My
And
honor.
Tamar, oh, well, Tamar is the daughter of Hal and stepdaughter of Sidra Stone, and she's an extraordinary facilitator, and her box of selves are beautiful, and definitely hunt those down. They're terrific. But she is also working on her book called 7 Gifts from My Father's Garden. And I just want to honor that. She's maybe in her final 8th with that book. And also to say her father died just a few weeks ago, peacefully in his sleep. And my heart is with him and with you. He's certainly a beloved in my life. And let's honor Hal and Sidra today as part of our time here, because voice dialogue is an integral part of the tools that I offer in the book. And Tamar, maybe you'd like to say something about voice dialogue, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. Well, yeah, voice dialogue is the technique for giving voice to yourselves. And it's based on a premise called, or a philosophy called the psychology of selves and the aware ego process. And basically it's that we all have selves. They're universal. Everybody has selves. But the difference at the personality level is the degree to which we over-identify with certain selves and repress and disown other selves. And there's this added piece here, which is for every self that we over-identify with, meaning it's dominant in our personality, it's sort of like the lens or lenses we're looking out of, there's an equal and opposite self that gets repressed or disowned. So there's this mathematical way of beginning to sort of figure out or flush out, which you do so beautifully in your book, Bridgit, but to flush out who are these selves and why are they here, and the idea that, you know, that our primary selves were born to protect us. They want us safe in the world. They just go about it again through their own particular lenses. And so they serve us in an incredible way by protecting us, but they also can, as we grow up and they're still functioning as if we're children in our family of origin or in the communities we've grown up in, they can hold us back as well, which you go into in your book as well. So that's the foundation of voice dialogue and why we value it so personally and professionally.
Thank you. That's a great description. And so,
yeah, so I have some questions for you, my dear. I mean, first of all, I just want to acknowledge, I feel like your book has come out at a really unique time in our history, you know, these are not unique, I mean, they're a very unique time, this COVID experience that we're all sharing. And I mean, I think it's brought up a lot of things for a lot of people. And I think one of them is like the final 8th. I think people have been meeting, you know, their blocks and their resistances to doing things that they need to do or want to do or think they should do. Or so I think the timing of your book is really important. And I want to acknowledge that. And then I'd love to ask you some questions about your book, which is, why do people stop themselves before finishing the final steps to their goals?
well, I think there's a few reasons. And I think it's distinct depending on the person. But I think those people that get 7/8 of the way there, they have a whole set of selves that believe in the goal, work hard for it. They can be maybe pushers, responsible ones, even visionaries. And there's a lot of permission. A lot of these are primary selves to work hard, and you get 7/8 of the way there. And then it really is a transformation of identity to go from contender to victor. And I think that's what happens with the final eighth. It's you end up sort of being in a tug of war between the parts of you that are excellent at working hard, but then you get stalled because there's those parts of you that find it scary. And as you know, with voice dialogue, when you talk to different parts, we find out their wisdom. So the parts that are not happy about moving to the next level have genuinely good reasons. When you do voice dialogue, and the readers can absolutely use the book to do it for themselves, you find out what the wisdom is. And there's always some wisdom. Now, it could be distorted, and then it's just the view of this part of you has to be upgraded to what's current events. But often it's legitimate fears. And so if you take care of those concerns directly and listen to them, like a perfect example was someone that I worked with who ended up, really moving ahead in her career that she wanted. These are cherished goals, and people really are talented. And it came up because in my practice, I knew they were working hard. It was a mystery to even me. Like, I don't understand what's happening. You've got this track of work, you've got the connections, you're motivated, what is going on? And those other parts have a lot of wisdom, as I've said. But so this part said, if you keep moving into success, you're actually going to have a real drinking problem. And that was shocking because I'd worked with her for a while and there was no talk about alcohol. But this part was right. The idea that there was going to be more socializing, more anxiety, which is also excitement. And so the whole focus of our work changed. That also she had to grow parts that could make boundaries, that could say no, that could go get self-care, that would practice basically safe drinking. So once those parts were dealt with and brought into the fullness of who she was able to move forward. And it wasn't about working harder. So rarely is it about working harder.
That's so interesting. Do you find that there are certain selves that are more common at that final eighth point that kind of run interference or block or get us stuck?
I would say there's fear is a common factor, fearful selves, but they can really look different. A different self that I dealt with, a person again who was working hard to get toward his goal, was very close. And then we actually dialogued with resistance. And this was a big block of resistance. And that's the other thing I always like to say is let's talk to those selves because they have your calendar. You're not doing it. So what else have you got to lose? You are trying and you are stuck. So this resistor self, and I was kind of expecting like a bulldozer, I say no, I wanted to know why. Suddenly this resistor self started sobbing from the bottom of his solar plexus, could not get words out, and then said, I am not the problem. You think I'm the problem, but I'm not. Because my client, according to the resistor self, was focusing on the wrong things. If the resistor self said, if that client continues to just focus on his deficits, he's going to die, never fixing all of his deficits. That is the wrong focus. He needs to get help for the things he's not going to learn and leave him alone. He's not going to learn those things, and it doesn't matter. And then that was a very powerful session. And within a short while, he actually changed the route of his goal. It shifted because it's like he didn't want it for the right reasons. And now he has that life that he couldn't imagine. He's almost an author for a second time. He has a globally recognized podcast. He's incredibly creative. And it never would have gone in the direction without this resistor self, who surprised us both.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love it. You talk in your book about a double bind and how it prevents us from reaching our goals. Is that something that you call also an inside job?
Yeah, so the double bind is really an irreconcilable situation. It's, the rock in a hard place. But it's also, if people know Sophie's Choice, it's like when the soldier said, pick which child that you're basically going to send to a certain death. It is a terrible psychological quandary. It's a faux choice. And so the double bind is one of the reasons people get stuck, and they just kind of grind deeper and deeper into this rut, and they want to do it and they can't. And until that is resolved, and how to resolve it is talking to the selves that are against the goal and see what's happening. And another thing that happens, and the book gets into this, is we find that many of those selves are actually in a distorted loyalty to their early caregivers. So they believe core negative beliefs from way back when, however it was that came to them. And it could be teachers, parents, but they've learned either terribly painful things like I'm worthless, I'm unlovable, life doesn't work out. And so even people who have done a lot of work with their consciousness, and it's wonderful, this book will meet people wherever they are. They've these deep early parts, they're very young, and they still believe it. So when you're moving along and things look like they're going to work out, it actually creates that psychological quandary, like, wait, but the truth is nothing works out. Or how can love happen when you're unworthy of love? And on some level, it can't. And inside, it's like, whoa, we're halting production. I mean, it's too uncomfortable. And so what you find out is that there are often really tender piece parts, alter egos that hold these very painful ideas. Now, they are false, but what is true is that people have lived their lives in ways as if it were true, and maybe made decisions as if it were true that they weren't worthy, or said no to opportunities that they would have said yes to if they didn't believe this false belief. So there's a lot of emotional work that comes with this for many people. But the great thing is, once you're aware of it, and you can love that inner child that you have that believes this, but you can say, hey, it's not true. It was never true. It's true you believed it. It's true you were told it, maybe, but it's not true. And you take those tender parts and you keep them close and you love them. And those aren't your leading parts. You then, as you take care of your inner selves, often again, that block melts because you're not in a double bind against your not self. You're saying, oh, I see, right. There can be love. Got it. You know, it sounds simple to talk about it in words because so much of this, as you know, is an energetic shift.
Yeah. Well, and it does sound like you're growing the awareness of the people you work with or the people who read your book, that there's something like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yes.
And that the parts are greater than the belief systems that they were raised on. They're more than that. And it's like they can get current as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And Tamar, I know you work a lot with the body too. You can go to a headache. You can go to a backache. I mean, voice dialogue is so creative because the other thing is often these final eighth problems show up in the body.
Yes.
You get exhausted, too foggy brained. And of course, you always check, is there a physical reason for a physical symptom? This is not you find that out. Yes. But then is the fogginess a protection self, like that's worried about what you're going to find out if you get too much clarity and that you won't be able to handle it. And so a lot of it then is about saying, okay, then if I can't handle it, where can I go to learn how to handle something or to get support? And you don't have to do it alone. You can't do it alone, I don't think.
So it's almost like what I'm hearing in identifying your final eighth and the selves, involved, you can get resourced in the way that they and you need to be resourced to continue the journey and into the final eighth.
Yes. Yes. And the other thing that sometimes happens, which is saying yes and to what you just said, is that sometimes the final eighth stall is simply because you don't have access to the selves that are involved. It's not necessarily a core belief, but you don't have access to your visionary, to your Paul Bunyan, to your charge through, or whatever it is. And sometimes people have very ambivalent relationships with their assets. And I talk about sometimes assets being poisoned in the book and how to detox them, because a lot of people have been put down for strengths, like you're too loud, you're too big, you're too much. And so you start to think those parts of yourself are problematic. And again, just like every self, it could be problematic if there's too much. But if you can't be a visionary for your own goal, who else is going to be? You must be able to access that part. So that's the other thing. You get to meet this wild inner team of selves you may not have known were there. And you're like, oh my gosh, it's so liberating.
It sounds liberating. It sounds very exciting. You say in the book that a crisis can move us to create a new self or to activate alter egos that we already have in a different way. Can you tell us more about this? And especially in relationship to these times, this time of COVID, this time of social injustice.
Yeah. Well, like brain plasticity, I think we can have inner selves plasticity. In other words, we can cultivate the parts that we need if we're aware of it and know that we can. And it happens naturally, like when you become a student. Before you weren't, were you in school, you didn't have any student selves. So natural development is a way that we get new selves. The surges of adolescence and menopause, divorce and marriage, all of those things, the way you enter perfectly normal, perfectly healthy developmental stages. But then some people have a diagnosis, even separate from COVID. And that is a time when you've got to rally new parts, whatever that is. And so COVID is a global situation where that's partly what makes this so different, is that the world is shifting and having to change what parts that they lead with. And a lot of our parts that are connected to our heart's desire, which I really think the final 8 goals, if they are part of your heart's desire, that's the best. They often whisper. And so COVID and having to go in, you can listen. And maybe there's that part of you that never liked going to the office as much as you thought you did. And maybe there's a chance now to think about following up on that dream maybe you put in the drawer 10 years ago. So, because the world is saying we're not going back to what it was. It's unclear what the new is going to be right now, but a lot of what was isn't going to be. And yes, there's loss and that needs to be grieved, but there's a lot that could come forth. Look at how many Zoom users there are. I know I was one. I didn't have a Zoom user until like, I don't know, March 29th. And then it's like, and so once you get over that fear, it's kind of exciting. And the same with social justice or even transformational processes. That's how you get access to different selves. And then society can mirror back the music of the selves that you align with. And it's a really great instrument for change.
You know, Bridget, I'm touched by your book because I read it as a manuscript and I'm waiting to receive my copy so I can read it again now as a self-help book. But what touches me is that that the final 8 can be applicable to anything. It can be, you know, professional goals. It could be athletic goals. It could be personal, you know, very, very personal goals. It could be relationship goals. I mean, it's such a breadth of work that can help anyone wherever you're living, whatever your challenges are.
It's accessible wellness, really. And
it's wellness. I love that.
Yeah. And one of the things that give me hope from where I am is that I work with young adult clients. They already know how important emotional intelligence and emotional care is. And I think that knowledge is going to help people be stronger as things unfold and what's needed. Because strength in the old days was just the strength of power, of moving through, which of course is a mandatory strength. But more and more, it seems to me, people are aware of the strength of being able to sit, of being able to feel your feelings, of being able to take a step back and that that's not perceived as weakness. So I think what happens is as more people really embody and embrace their different selves, it's reflected back in society. It's like it changes society as you change. And that is just invigorating.
Oh, truly. I'm curious for you, if you could just speak to, and then I know you're going to do a reading as well. What your experience was with your final eighth in relationship to bringing the final eighth to completion?
Ah, yes. Expect the unexpected. I worked for many years on this book. It really is a culmination of my life's work. And I had my core negative beliefs. And so the other thing is when you're stuck in a goal, the selves that believe in your core negative belief, they'll use the fact that you're frustrated and not sure which way to go and kind of stuck as proof that your core negative belief is true. It's false. So that I was trapped in that a little bit. Like you're looking at, well, other people do this easier, so something must be wrong with me. So I had to let go of that and get to those selves like, wait a minute. Then one day, a while back, I stumbled upon, or I should say, I got clarity about the double bind. And that was new. And that's when I realized, now I understand what's happening. They're in a showdown, like a tug of war. And I thought, that's why it's taken me so long to write this book. I needed this piece. So know that when you're in the struggle, it may simply be, this is what needs to happen for the new part to come out. So that was a final eighth, like, wow, I still had a long way to go to finish the book, but now I understood that that was a missing piece. And I had a sense there was a missing piece, but that's it. I could not find it until that came in. And then the day that I finished, I remember it well, it was a February 2019. I went back to it because I just kept going back to it wherever I was. And sometimes I took long breaks, Tamar, I'll admit, like weeks and weeks, but eventually I'd go back to it. It was such a quiet moment. I realized I'm finished.
Wow.
It's done. I have nothing more to say. And now, of course,
amazing.
after that, I had to edit, and then it went into a new first eighth. But that I would never have expected. It was just a quiet knowing. And I sat there. I did not run around and scream. I did later, like 2 minutes later. But for those 2 minutes, it was like coming home.
Yeah, it's like something like you dropped into yourself and like settled with yourselves around that you have completed your final eighth. I mean, how cool is that? Wow.
Quite, by the way, quite cool.
Yeah, and I imagine like it's probably different for different people what that might feel like, but that's one way that it might feel. And
yeah,
love that.
Yeah, I expected cartwheels and all of that, and that maybe came later. Yeah, so be open to surprises.
Yeah, beautiful.
And on that note, should I read a little? Open to surprises.
We'd be honored to hear a portion of your book.
So I'm going to read. I'm just going to jump in. But as I read, I encourage participants that if you hear a self, you might want to write that down. Maybe you have some of these selves, and I'm sure that you do. So this is in the book. Don't negate the negative. An important goal of voice dialogue is simply to experience a subpersonality as a separate entity, without its being drowned out or otherwise concealed. You may find this uncomfortable because it's unusual for these hidden parts to be allowed out. In addition, these inner selves are often intense. Acknowledging these alter egos can be painful, but it's often worth the distress as it can increase our willingness to try new things. As an example, I'll share a highly embarrassing outburst I had at a clinic where I worked a long time ago. Due to the dictates of my nice and scared selves, my general pattern was to stay in situations I should have quit long before. My pleaser and perfectionist kept me focused on doing an excellent job. This was a helpful strategy at first, as I accrued many invaluable skills as part of my first 7/8. But simmering underneath was a vague awareness of frustration, boredom, and despair, the magnitude of which I did not consciously grasp. I was also aware of fatigue and headaches. What did not register, as it was completely disowned and hidden, was that deep inside I was getting very angry. I didn't realize how much I disagreed with the warped priorities of my department's supervisors. The truth is, I didn't respect them. These highly educated individuals spent an inordinate amount of time distracting themselves with idleness, irrelevance, and insensitivities. Every single quarter, the bosses would act like it was a surprise when the accreditors arrived for their regular site visit, forcing the staff to abandon their clinical work to do hours of busy work that was 100% avoidable. After a long day, as I was racing to leave work for my evening part-time gig, my primary selves include doer and work, work, work selves, I suddenly remembered that I hadn't done one last task at the clinic, something I felt shouldn't even be part of my job description. Having worked unpaid overtime once again while the supervisors had long since gone home, I felt a flash of anger as I ran back to get it done. Suddenly, my raging bull self erupted and threw folders across the room, starting a cascade of destruction. The files collided with a large glass vase filled with dying flowers on my colleague's messy desk. As it broke, the shards ricocheted into the window and cracked it. Fetid water oozed over my coworker's pile of paperwork. For a second, all I could do was look in disbelief at the mini Superfund site I just created. I'd been running late already. I was incensed as I scurried to find a towel to clean up as best I could in less than a minute. Thoroughly enraged, I ran out of the building and grabbed a cab and snarled at the address I needed to get to. On a scale from 1 to 10, the anger of my raging bull was at a level 10. As the cab crawled across town and choked traffic to get to my second job, my rage slowly evaporated. And as my raging bull self retreated back into hiding, I felt my vulnerability and began shaking with fear and mortification. How was I going to explain not only the broken vase, but the busted skyscraper window? My inner little girl was terrified of getting in trouble and being fired. My good girl and nice selves dreaded other people finding out that I'm not so nice all the time. Even worse, my behavior seemed to confirm their worst fear, that I'm really a terrible person. As my let's assess this self reviewed what happened, I calmed down. Helping me relax and take a larger view is a major gift of this mature self, which concluded that given the mess I'd created, I had cleaned up pretty well. Also, I had completed the original moronic task that started this unfortunate chain of events. Then this self went into damage control mode and eventually came up with a good explanation for the wreckage. My public relations doyen and poker face are also members of my Fix This Situation team. By the time my taxi finally reached my destination, I was only a few minutes late, could see a bit of humor in the fiasco, and was able to focus on my next stint. In the end, my Fix This Situation alter egos triumphed. Not only had I cleaned up well enough that the truth was never discovered, but the damage was covered by insurance. For 2 weeks, the mystery of the broken window gripped the office suite. The glass was replaced in a complex operation executed by a crew of professional high-rise scalers who gained an unexpected contract from my misdeed. This did make me note the economic benefits from repairs necessitated by destructive outbursts of hidden selves, but I digress. But there was a more important consequence. The sting of my raging bull was obvious. Its gift was the message that I needed to heed my deep unhappiness at my situation. Humiliating though it was to lose it at the office, it made me pay attention to my profound dissatisfaction. Not long thereafter, I left the job of my own accord and on good terms with my employers. My raging bull was right. It was time to break out of that barn and graze on new, wide open pastures.
Woo! Great story. Great.
So I thought it could lead into our doing an exercise, and participants can do it too. Is like one of the exercises, what is the gift and what is a sting of each part? And also labeling the parts, like how many parts did you find in that little bit? It was pleaser, perfectionist, fixer-upper.
Dutiful. I heard, like, I mean, that you were sort of duty bound to sort of, do something that was in the job description, but but it like it was no longer your spirit's to do, but there was a duty to do it. Yeah.
And I was practicing reading this today, and I found a new self that never occurred to me in this story. The martyr, the one that worked too hard. Like, you could argue my supervisors went home when it was time to go home, right? So that was interesting. And that's what I also love about this technique. You might go back to something and realize, oh, there's a whole other self here I didn't see. So that was about an hour and a half ago. I'm like, there's the martyr.
That's great.
I don't know if people just want to do it, but think about the gift and the sting. Do you want to say a couple for you, like a couple of yourselves, maybe that say a little, what's a gift and a sting of?
Well, I think about sometimes procrastination as an example, like, if I'm over-identified with my procrastinator, I'll have a very clean house, very orderly drawers, but, the project doesn't get done necessarily. However, on the other side, I also find sometimes by, like the essence of procrastination is more like incubation, like sometimes if I finish something, like if my perfectionist is running the show, I might finish it because I just want to get it over with. And then I go out, let's say, and walk my dog and go, and I send it out, the email out, it's complete, I feel good. And then I realize, oh my God, I just had an insight that would have been so perfect. And if I would have incubated a little longer and given myself a chance to sort of be with it, and not just check it off my list, taskmaster, that I might have actually like softened something or brought another little piece in that would have been meaningful and more complete for me. So it's that fine line of, getting something done, checking it off my to-do list versus also living with it and being with it.
And then we often have negative labels for that part, like a procrastinator in our society. That's a negative label. And so I think that's kind of part of the detox is you can say, wait, it's called the procrastinator, and maybe technically that's what's going on, but there's incubation. There's also gorgeously clean drawers, which can help organize a mind. Like, it's sometimes as you organize your space, you're like, now I know what I'm going to do for that problem you had forgotten you were wrestling with. I've had that happen.
Yeah, lovely.
So I see someone's here talking about selves. So let's see. Someone here is saying her inner military lieutenant, the sting is this knows nothing but the mission and only focuses on that which can overwhelm others who are not able to commit. And I guess that could be inside or out. It could be other parts, but it could also be people in your own life. Like, if you just come on with the military general saying, here's the mission, some people may not want to join you. And that can be painful. And someone else said her inner drill sergeant makes her work until she's injured. Right, you override the body. And the body is all we have. Yeah,
that's true. It's all we have. Like, we wouldn't be here without it.
And so I see a question. Should we move into questions? I hear what someone's asking. So what if you are reticent and you believe your inner selves are also reticent or shy? Can you have a productive voice dialogue with that part, or will it just be silent? Well, that's a great question.
Yeah, great.
So with voice dialogue, and in the book we talk about this, thanks for that question, dialoguing is not just words. That's true in life. So we communicate with our emotions, with our body, with our energy, also with our words. And so, yes, you could go to a self and enter the energy of that self. And if that self is really not a vocal self, whether it's shy or for some other reason, you just stay in that energy and don't make it talk. And then you always come back to center, because you want to become the conductor of your own orchestra. And so then you would maybe journal about what that self, the role of that self in your life. In the book, there's lots of questions you can do. But yes, not when you communicate with different selves, it may not just be language. I don't know if you want to add to that, Tamar.
Yeah, no, I love what you said. It's really honoring each self, and you know, it's feelings, it's thoughts, it's shyness, it's tenderness, it's, you know, whatever it is, it's rage, it's honoring and accepting it for what it is, and not trying to make it something else. As a facilitator, it's like, it's our job as a facilitator, it's really more to resonate with the selves that we're speaking with, not having an agenda for them, not trying to change them. So yeah, huge permission for a self to just be a self, whoever it is.
And a side effect of the work is compassion. I always say you don't have to aim for it, but just what you said, resonating with your own parts and just letting them be whatever it is they are, is so validating that you just end up having more compassion and grace and space for maybe a better strategy, because you could be at your final eighth stuckness because it's not the right strategy. You have to come and think of other ways. You've done whatever you can think of. And you know, it's very interesting, Tamar, I don't know if you find this in your practice, but a lot of people that I've worked with, and it's in the book, is that when you tell them, in order to move ahead, you cannot rely on your elementary school rules of success. It's devastating. And it's sounds funny, but really, this has happened to so many people, and it's across the board. It's not just people in creative fields, it's lawyers, it's bankers. There's something very like your primary parts want you to know how the world works, and it's like, well, working hard gets you ahead. You know, an education guarantees you something. Well, maybe you're like, the chances are higher, but it's not necessarily true. And so the other part of the final eighth is the challenge to meet these other selves, which might be scarier, like the shy self. That self may freak out at the idea of going to a networking event, like literally panic and send up all of your fight, flight, freeze chemicals into waterfalls. And that's okay. You let that panic self talk, but then you hold and you take care of it. And then if it's true that this goal still resonates, then it's important to start to cultivate. Well, you can enter a networking event in your own style. What parts would feel comfortable? You have a lot more power than you think when you don't think, well, how am I going to fit in? And it's, wait, no, which part wants to be the one? But it's a real shift in how you think.
Yeah, I mean, I get the image sometimes of literally, it's like we have our arm around a self, or put our finger in the parched mouth and let it, you know, I'm here, I'm connected to you. Yes, I'm going to go, but I'm not disconnected to you. I know that you're shy. I'm not going to dance on the table and after 3 drinks. I promise. I respect your shyness, and we're in this together.
Yeah. And also sometimes I would say you need to put your very young inner selves, imagine that they're with their favorite babysitter eating their most favorite food, and you don't bring your inner children to the negotiating table. Also, it's like you can pick and choose to what is the best subpersonality with the exact precise superpower that you need for this. And that also gives you more control, because
Mhm.
The people at the negotiating table, they don't want to deal with your angry, acting out teenager self. They don't want that self in you either.
Right. I love the way you said your superpower self. You know, there is, it's so lovely. It's so acknowledging of you know, because all these parts do have their particular, you know, frequency and personality and gifts. Yeah.
And in one of the chapters, I have a chapter devoted, some of ourselves might be acting out, so to speak, and they only use the method they have. So my angry self might tap me a bit on the shoulder, but if I'm not going to pay attention, eventually my personal raging bull is going to explode. And so ourselves only use the methods of communication they have. So a procrastinator is only going to say, let's slow down. And as you're aware of that, and then you, like you said, Tamar, you have direct relationship with these different selves. Some selves have been insulted with a job that's too small. And so sometimes you need to give them the honor of a noble task, of a very important place in terms of your goal. So sometimes like an organizer may be really angry because you're just organizing the bathroom, when really it wants to organize your next campaign and how to make it bigger. And so often some of that block melts when it's like, oh, wow, right, I was actually squelching a self by giving it a demeaning task. And then you have other selves who are like, no, I just want to be in the kitchen, and I like, great, those are the exact parts of you that should be in there having a blast. So that's a big one. And the other thing I have in there, which is maybe sometimes a little taboo, but as I was writing this tomorrow, I realized, oh, this book is really geared toward type A selves, type, you know, the go-getters. And so I had to put in a whole chapter to get rid of the goal. Like, this is not about you have to do the goal just because one day a long time ago you said you wanted to do X. So I do have a whole chapter on if the goal doesn't fit anymore, or if it doesn't please you anymore, or it's somehow you're using always having this goal, this mirage goal that you never get to, as an avoidance technique, because then you're always doing something so you don't have to feel maybe the bigger feelings. You can let go, and that's very much a part of this book.
I love that, because it also begs the question of whose goal was it? Was it really an aware ego kind of goal, or was it the goal of a self that you no longer really feel motivated to fulfill? And how wonderful to know really what your goals are and what they're not. That's equally important.
Exactly. And one thing I learned from your beloved parents, Hal and Sidra, is they're like, you need to check in and see what resonates with you. It's not necessarily that it's right or wrong. Those are limiting paradigms.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of clients, and I'm sure you do, who have a lot of amazing skills and talents. And I talk about this in the book. So what if you're truly excellent and gifted at 3 amazing things that are very different? You have to pick. And so often it's not because you couldn't have done something really, really well, but what resonates. And I really learned that from your parents. And get out of pleasing. Well, you know, my spouse would like that, or my boss would prefer this. Okay, good information, but what resonates? And that's so empowering. It's like you bring yourself back home to find out where do we go next? What do we do? And sometimes you don't just do something, you sit there.
Yeah, that's nice. Do you ever recommend to practice, like if you have something big you want to do and it's kind of overwhelming still, to take something, like make something little and practice the techniques with something, so you have like a sense of achievement?
Oh, absolutely. So like if you were going to do that, what self would help you find that little piece?
Like a little practice piece? Probably the self that wants to accomplish something, like wants to check something off my list for my own satisfaction.
Exactly. And so the other thing you bring up is, I think most readers are going to have an extraordinary number of skills: time management skills, social media optimization wizardry, lots of things. So they get really puzzled, like, I have all of these skills, how come they're not working?
Mhm.
And I think you bring up a really good point. Like, go to your toolbox, and like breaking things down to smaller manageable bits is a wonderful skill. And if there's a part of you that, if you're just overwhelmed, and you can say, oh wait, let me get that part that's like, let's just break this down. What could I do today? Or what could I, oh, maybe I should have lunch. Maybe this is a little low blood sugar. And, then I'll go and do X. So that's the other great thing, is often then it's like you get access back to these skills you paid a lot of money and spent a lot of time learning. And then it's like you remember these things that you had forgotten.
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, I could see that just being like muscle building.
Exactly. I'm kind of peeking over to see.
Yeah.
So here's a question. Could a self even be so young that it's pre-verbal? I say yes. And because our selves start very early, and we review this in the book, but they start in infancy. And again, this is about healthy personality, healthy bonding. Nothing we're talking about is about mental illness. It's really about, we have these different selves that some were reinforced in our household and some were squelched a little bit. And socialization is important. You want your kid toilet trained. I want them toilet trained too. So there's a lot of energy navigation that people have to learn and be taught. And so some selves are pre-verbal. And then the same, you could go to this pre-verbal self and you just be in that space and just be with it. And you never ask it to speak. And maybe it'll have emotions, or maybe it'll just kind of rock, and you'll realize, oh, this is maybe one of your magical inner children. Just the one that's kind of there and taking in this world that we all are in. And then again, seeing how it resonates. Did you want to add anything about that?
No, that's lovely. Yeah, I think that that's really true. Like, it's just knowing what the self is feeling. It doesn't require words. Just having a felt sense that this part of me, this young, innocent, pre-verbal part of me, this is what it feels like, and it's there, and I need to know it and take care of it. But yeah, again, like to your point, you don't need words to know what a self feels like.
Yeah, and also sometimes with with any self, but say these tender young selves, maybe they weren't treated the best. And so you end up treating your own inner children in a way that's not the best. And so you get to reparent. You get to give them the love and security that maybe they didn't have. And that's the other really freeing thing, because we have it in us. We don't have to go outside. So that also happens. We sometimes reject parts of ourselves because that's what we were taught. We didn't even question it. Like, oh, I hate my lazy self. If being really productive is what's revered and honored in the household, there's nothing wrong with that. But then you end up really, some people will, I'll use the word hate, because it can be very powerful and painful, this part. And then you realize, oh, I don't have to hate that part. That's just a part of me that has its own connection to my vulnerability and its own noble purpose of protection. And maybe I can even like this part. You don't have to, there's no agenda, but at least you'll have your own direct relationship with all of your parts. And you can decide what kind of relationship that is. And just as you said, it's just often sometimes just feeling it. It's like an energetic validation. And you're like, oh, I got this. Great. And you're like, oh, so I'm just clear to go on my next step on my final 8th goal? Sometimes, yeah.
That's lovely. Yeah, that's lovely.
So a question that's coming up. Sorry to interrupt. Were you going to ask something?
No.
I'm looking at the thing. Yes, someone is asking about upcoming Zoom shops. And yeah, so one, as you know, Tamar, it's voice dialogue is amazing, but once you actually see it in action, you get a much better understanding of it. So my colleague Eric Potempa and I do a third Thursday of the month. At 8 p.m. Eastern, we do basic voice dialogue Zoom shop. So anyone is welcome. Just contact me and I'll get you the Zoom Zoom information. And we do 2 basic voice dialogue sessions, short, with 2 different people. So it's live, it's so people can get a sense of voice dialogue. And I think that's going to be great when going alongside with the book, and then seeing literally how you move over, some of the mechanics of the technique of voice dialogue. So yes, so the next one I think is October 15, but it's literally just count your 3rd Thursday, and we're there. And you can find me final8th.com and all over social media, or final8th@final8th.com. I'm happy to send you the Zoom info. So let's see. And I'm sorry if I'm not getting everyone's question. So how do you start that they? Oh, I may not be understanding this question, and it's probably got to be the final question because I see we're getting close to 8 o'clock. But how do you start to change the way your inner child thinks and start to heal that part of yourself? I'm going to say a few things, and Tamar, if you feel like you want to add, please do, and that then I'll wrap it up. But I think one of the ways is just what we said, just be with it, learn what its wounding is, and just hold it, and don't try to make it be or do something else. So if there's a very sad, wounded part of you and a young inner child, just be with it like you would any young little one. You would just hug it energetically, hold it. Sometimes people literally use stuffed animals to make it physical, to hold this soft part. And I believe that some of these young parts, they're always going to hold the story of that wounding, but that doesn't mean they're bad. And so you can honor them by just saying, right, that happened. And now I'm here. And it was bad. But I'm not going to reject you, beautiful little wounded inner child. And that it often happens as a side effect as opposed to directly trying to heal that child. And one of the questions we always ask is, what do you need? So you ask that inner child, what do you need? And then you make sure you give it to them. So if they say, I don't know, I want to just connect with you every afternoon, make sure you do it, like whatever they ask for, really try to honor it. And then the side effect is that the healing happens. Tamar, do you want to say anything else?
Said it perfectly and beautifully. I couldn't add anything. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Tamar, for being here. I'm going to
honor.
give you a Zoom hug, and they look like that.
It was my honor, Bridget, and I'm very excited, and congratulations on your book. It's come at a really, I think, important time, and it's a gift to all of us, so bless you.
Thank you. And I know you can get it at Powerhouse Arena, and signed copies. And any questions, comments, contact me. And Tamar, to be continued, because I have a self that does not like goodbyes. And is doing it right now. I'll just keep it going. Because I don't like goodbyes. Okay, Chris, take it away.
That's okay. That's okay. We like that stuff too. Thank you so much. It was lovely. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Tamar. Thank everyone who participated. If you missed any of the event for any reason, we'll have it on YouTube. And please buy a signed book. We have the link and the event page. Bridget so kindly signed the book plates. So yeah, so please follow up and find out more. Thank you.
Wow. Well, thank you, and sweet dreams.
Mm-hmm.